Okay. The format for this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, our secretary's announcement, a coffee and snack break, and our main speaker. Our first speaker for tonight is Katie.
Yay!
Oh, I'm Katie. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Katie.
And I want to thank the meeting for having us out here. Doing a little date night, AA thing. So my sobriety date is April 21st, 1995. And I got sober when I was 23, and now I'm 52, and I'm actually younger than I was when I got here. So I have to say, so this M up here is what it was like, right here. Make bad choices and avoid everything in each day as much possible. And see, it says make good choices and make each day count. It's exactly opposite. But anyway, so, they say to share what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And I want to welcome all the new people. And I know that this is, when I was new, this was a lot. It's like, I stumbled into the Winter Club in not AA meetings. They had Al-Anon and AA meetings there. And I came there because boyfriend said, why don't you go to Al-Anon and get better? That way you could help me get better. And I was like, oh, I don't have a problem, you do. And after a while, that's kind of what got me around meetings. But I have to say first that I love seeing Joe here. I got sober at the Winter Club, and Bob Lemke was my old timer. And he had wonderful, top-notch speakers. And Joe was one of the people on the list that I got to see at Winter Club. But what happened was, I'm I would never have admitted this when I was new, but I'm a lightweight drunk. And what that means is that it doesn't take a lot to get me drunk, but I really try really hard. And so, and I thought an alcoholic had to drink 47,000 beers and keep going. And so, for me, like I said, I got sober at 23, and so my life, because there's only 10 minutes, I didn't know that there was a thing called alcoholism. I didn't know that my family suffered from alcoholism. I grew up, in an alcoholic home, and it's not my mother's fault or anybody's fault that I'm an alcoholic. But it was there was a lot of hurt, and there was a lot of stuff that happened in the family. And so when I found alcohol, I really needed a drink. And I didn't know that I was an alcoholic, so I really needed it. And I had that, that twist that as soon as I drank, I couldn't stop it. It just went overboard all the time. And so I always tried, even from the first drink, I always tried to control it. I always tried, if I just, how I thought, once I started drinking, I couldn't stop drinking. It came into the house through a stepbrother. And I always tried to drink because cool people drank, right? Now, again, I drank. I never drank for I'm just going to have a drink. I always drank with intention. And that might be, for me, if I'm an alcoholic, if I drink, I'm going to have this with expectations. I always had expectations on when I drank. It was never like, this is a cool beverage, I'm just going to drink this and do something else. I always had an intention when I drank. And so it never and so being a lightweight drunk was really confusing. So I always tried to hang with big people. So I drank because I was in a lot of pain, and then I drank to escape the pain. And then when I drank, I didn't escape the pain. I always overdid it and ended up throwing up and passing out. And so when I tried all the combinations, I tried everything I could, and so I found AA. I never knew that there was Alcoholics Anonymous until I had a friend that got sober. Because I was compared, I never drank as hard as everybody else, so how could that be alcoholic? But when I had a friend that got sober, and he said, I'm going into Alcoholics Anonymous, It's an outpatient program. I'd been going to Al-Anon meetings, and so I pulled out the 12 steps and the 12 traditions and said, I know all about that. So knowing about it didn't mean anything to me until I was willing to apply what was in here to myself. And so I scared myself into AA because I'm living with my grandparents, and I'm starting to kick holes in the walls of my bedroom door, of my bedroom, and I'm starting to like go home from a guy. I went home with a guy from a bar one time. Luckily for me, he took no for an answer, and I was like really naive. And so when I found AA, I was instantly attracted to the fellowship. I didn't know how I was going to stop drinking, but I saw people in meetings that were stopping drinking, and I had a group around me. But what I had to do is they told me they told me I had to do stuff to get sober. They said, you need to do stuff if you want to be sober. It wasn't just go to meetings, you need to do stuff. And so what was that stuff? The stuff that they were doing was, they were all on fire of AA. None of them had over a year sober. but I caught a wind. It was like, I'm glad I got caught up in the crosswind. And the crosswind was, you go to meetings, you get a sponsor. And I was a girl, they said, get a girl sponsor. And I was like, oh, I hate girls. Now it's different. But at the time, and see, and but they said, and if I called them, they wouldn't let me talk to them about my problems. They said, no, you need to call your sponsor. And I was like, no, because she was always saying, you're too sensitive. And I was like, but all this pain that I came in with, that's why I needed a sponsor. And I didn't know it. They just said, if you work the steps, you can stay sober. They didn't say if you work the steps, you're going to be able to sleep at night, you're going to have relationships, you're going to change. They just said, if you want to stay sober, work the steps. It was really simple. And so it was told to me that way. So I did. I came in and I worked the steps, and they said, you have to say yes to AA requests. And they said that if you're an alcoholic, you have to come up and say you're an alcoholic. And so the first time I said I'm an alcoholic, it was like cut in my throat. But then my whole life I had been looking for something that made me comfortable. I mean, I couldn't tell you that, but that was what I was looking for. And so I loved the feeling of being in here. Because it's the only thing in my life that brought any kind of comfort, like when I was new. And the longer I stayed sober, and everybody that I was sober with when I first got here, they all seemed to go out when I was a year. and I was at a crossroads. I was like, because the fellowship was wonderful. We were going to meetings all the time. And when they all went out, because you know what, if I don't work on it, I'm going to drink. And so all my friends, for some reason, they all went out. And so I was at a crossroads, and I was like, do I want this thing or not? And luckily, I realized that I wanted this, and so I still kept. An old-timer, Sailor Jim, said when I got a year, you keep doing what you did in your first year, which was get a sponsor, work the steps, say yes to AA requests. Now, obviously, today my program is more deeper. I do more stuff. I like the meditation stuff. Now, meditation is a scary word. When I was 18 years sober, I started becoming monster mama because I have these kids that won't listen to me. and I'm sober and I'm going to meetings and stuff, but I'm losing my mind and I'm becoming monster mama with them. And so when I get in pain, I pull out the tools. And they'd always said, meditate. Now all that is 10 minutes. Now it used to be 2. It was like get my cell phone and then 2 and then start. That's it. But there was something magic that happened when I did that. And so I like to feel better. So today I do more than that, and then I get to feel better. Now I do that, and it's not like, oh, I have to stop my mind. It's the action, and the rest is, as long as I take the action, I get results. And so there's a lot to it. That's pretty much it. I'm really glad to be here. I can't wait to hear David. He's still my favorite speaker. And nice to see Joe. Thank you.
Just give everybody a minute. Okay. All right, now I'm going to recite the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Okay, now our main speaker will share his story, his experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming David from La Crescenta Treehouse. Yes. Okay, David.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is David Delbus, and I am an alcoholic. And first off, it's good to be sober. It's good to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd like to thank Alan and the meeting for having me out here tonight. I'm one of those people that believes it's a good deal and a good opportunity to be at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And welcome to the new people. There must have been 8 or 10 new people here tonight. I absolutely love that, and if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, welcome to AA. And I really enjoyed the girl who did the grapevine, and she stole my opening joke. I was like, no. But I got another one for you. I've got another joke for you. It's just like, you know what the difference? If they say, optimism is the glass is half full. Pessimism is the glass is half empty, and alcoholism is, are you going to drink that? I think that's funny. I think that's a good joke. Anyway, thank you very much. So, my sobriety birth date is December 19th of 1988. That kind of gives you an idea. I've been sober. I was telling class of 88, and I got sober when I was 24 years old, and I didn't get here a day too early. Katie always likes to point out that she got sober when she was 23, and so she got sober younger than me. So any young people here in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's possible, and I don't believe I got here a day too early. I was dying of this disease when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, and just so I can get an idea, can I see the hands of all the people with less than a year of sobriety? Can I see the hands of all the people with less than a year of sobriety? Awesome. Awesome. Welcome, you guys. And you know what? I'm here for you guys. I am a newcomer speaker in AA, just straight up. I love the new people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the truth is that I never planned on getting sober when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I always like to tell you that when I came into the doors, I was dying of this disease, and it was just, I was miserable. And I didn't think Alcoholics Anonymous had anything to offer me. I really didn't, And when I first got sober, the meeting I started at was the Dunsmore Sunday Night Speaker meeting, which is still a regular meeting for me. And when I first got sober, I would go to this meeting, and it was one of those meetings where if you didn't show up at least 30 minutes before the meeting started. It started at 6:30 and it went till 8 o'clock. And if you didn't get there 30 minutes before the meeting started, you ended up sitting on the floor. Now, the Dunsmore Club is actually only designed to hold about 80 or 85 people. That's about the number of chairs they have in the room. And on a Sunday night, by the time the speaker meeting started, there would be 110, 115 people crammed into this little room. And I would be in there, and I go to the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll get into some of my story a little bit. And the thing is that there was a buzz and electricity going on in the room when I came into the doors. And it seemed like they were all in on something. And they were talking about things, and they were saying kind of like what I call the buzzwords and catchphrases of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they were talking about doing inventory and doing stuff and getting commitments and different stuff. And I didn't understand what they were talking about. And the thing was, it seemed like they were all in on something, and I wasn't, because I didn't know what they were talking about. And I always liked it. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, Philadelphia, with Tom Hanks. And in it, Denzel Washington is talking to him, and he says, "Tell it to me like I'm a 6-year-old." And I'm not saying we got to dumb it down, but the truth of the matter is I got to remember that when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, I did not understand the language of the heart. I didn't know what you guys were talking about around here. But after I've been around here for a while, after I'd studied the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, after I had done some of the work around here, after I'd done some inventory, if I got a sponsor, after I did some of the commitments around here, after that, things started to change. And all of a sudden, a lot of the things that I thought I knew in my head, all of a sudden started having more what the book calls as depth and weight. And I thought, oh, that's what they meant by that. And I actually thought it gave it a different sense of meaning. And for me, it's so important that I do some of the work that Katie talked about up here, you know. And I do. I absolutely love Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't like AA a little bit. I absolutely love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't say that in a past tense phrase. The thing is that it's just something that has happened in my life. You know, I came in here dying of this disease. You know, I actually got a little off track a little bit. But the thing is that when I came in here, I didn't think any of this was going to work. I thought I was wasting my time. I saw those people raising their hands. When I came in here at 24 years old and dying of this disease, I thought I was wasting my time, and I didn't think any of this was going to work. I really, really didn't think any of this was going to work. And I'm so grateful that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works in spite of how I feel, or in spite of all those kind of things. As long as I'm willing to take the actions, AA has changed my life from the inside out, I'm also one of those people that believes it's important for me to tell you what I was like out there. I just think it's important, you know. I don't know about you, but when I go to a speaker meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have expectations of the speaker. I don't know if you have expectations of me here tonight, but when I go to a speaker meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm sitting in your seat, I have expectations of the speaker. And this is it. I want to laugh. I want to cry, and I want to hear the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know about you. I want a lot for my dollar. I really do, you know? And then after the meeting, I want to go out for coffee after the meeting and talk crap about the speaker. That's what I like to do. I don't know about you, but that's what I like to do. And over the course of the years, I've heard a lot of really good speakers I love in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know? And one of the things is they'll say something like this. They'll say something like this. They'll go, you all know what it's like to drink and get loaded out there, so I'm just going to talk about sobriety. And right before I started talking, I said, how many people here have less than a year of sobriety? And I think that's a disservice to every person that is new in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, because when those people would share their stories, I didn't identify it. And this was a really simple reason why. It's because I had no recovery. If I've got no recovery, I got nothing to connect with. But then we would get these speakers in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you this right now. The people that are the sickest, most twisted, most warped people in Alcoholics Anonymous seem to have the most greatest transformations in Alcoholics Anonymous. Isn't that what it's really all about around here? It's about the transformation of from where we were to where we get in sober and in Alcoholics Anonymous today. And I'm one of those people that believes it's important. I like to hear the bedtime story. And if you don't know what I mean by the bedtime story, it's like if you've ever read like the fairy tales and things like that. In the fairy tales, the monster is always winning. The witch is going to get the kids and get them into the oven. You know, the wolf is going to eat Little Red Riding Hood, and there's no way that the heroine or that the hero in the story is going to get away. But something happens, and all of a sudden, the monster gets bested. And when I come into meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm hearing a speaker, I want to hear how the monster was killing you, how the monster was eating you alive, and you had no hope of ever getting out of this thing alive. And then as a result of coming in here and doing the stuff that we suggest, the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous happened. And that's what I want to hear. And my old sponsor, Clint, used to say this. He used to say, you know, when you get an opportunity to do something like this, that I should leave it all out in the field. Doesn't matter if it's 2 people or 100 people or whatever. When I come into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I need to do this talk like this is the first talk I've ever given in AA. Like this is the last talk I'm ever going to give in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like this is the only talk that I'm ever going to get an opportunity to carry the message to some people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's pretty good, and that's pretty heady, but that's the kind of stuff that we learn around here, you know. And I like to tell you what I was like out there. I really do. I think it's really, really, really important because, again, if all people talk about is recovery, I don't have any identification. And identification is one of the cornerstones of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. I like to tell you what I was like when I grew up a little bit. I grew up in Locker Center, which is where I live right now, but I didn't do very well academically. I'm what my friend Nancy, Katie's sponsor, calls as a D-stop student, which basically means that you deserve an F, but they're tired of looking at you. I don't know if there's anybody here that used to get excited by D-minuses. I love D-minuses because at least it meant I passed, you know. And I didn't even care if I didn't deserve it, you know. It's just like, that's okay by me. I'm also not the tallest person in the world. You can kind of look at me, I'm about 5'6", you know. And I was never, I don't know if you remember when they pick up like dodgeball teams and soccer teams and football teams and baseball teams. I was never a team captain. I was never first string or second string or third string. It got down to the point where there'd be like 2 of us left, and they'd go, you know what? You take David and we'll take Susie with the crutch. And it's just like, man, I don't want to play anyway, you know? And I didn't feel like I was good enough, you know? Katie always likes this story. I don't know if you remember when you were a kid and you would get you would telegraph what you wanted for Christmas to Santa Claus through the chain of command. Somehow it would get out there that what you wanted, a bicycle, whatever it is. Well, this one particular year when I was like 9 years old, I got it telegraphed out to the powers that be that I wanted a set of walkie-talkies. I don't know if I wanted to be a spy or army or whatever it was, but I wanted a set of walkie-talkies. And it came back through the chain of command somehow that I was going to get what I wanted. And I was really excited about that. Christmas morning comes up that year, and I open the package, and I'm expecting a set of walkie-talkies. And what it was is my dad he was a frugal man. I'll just put it that way. And what it was is he had gone to not a junkyard, but he'd gone to a garage sale. And somebody had a walkie, and I got a walkie for Christmas from a garage sale. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at my dad. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? And my dad said, well, find somebody else who has one. It's like, thanks, Dad. You know, it's just like, and the thing is I'm not an alcoholic because I got a walkie for Christmas. But the truth of the matter is it made me feeling that I didn't deserve nice things, you know. And I also didn't have a lot of friends. I had a couple friends, but I didn't do well. And I just kind of just went along with my life. My parents bought all my clothes at thrift stores. Again, my dad was a frugal man. You know, it might be really cool today to buy all your clothes at thrift stores. To be honest, I buy my clothes at thrift stores now. I'm a little bit more selective in how I do it, but I buy my clothes at thrift stores, and I like that because I'm not going to spend $300 for a suit that I can get for $10 at the Salvation Army. And anyway, so that's just the way it is. But I just didn't feel that well, you know, and I didn't get in. I didn't do well academically, and all that kind of stuff. And you know, I did. And the thing was is that I finally ended up this particular time when I was about 14 years old. I always wanted my own room. I don't know if you've ever wanted, if you grew up with family and all that kind of stuff, I wanted my own room. And I didn't have my own room. And I had seen this treehouse on a vacation about the year before, and I decided I was going to build a treehouse in my parents' front yard. And when I was done, I actually had a pretty good sized room. I had gotten all the construction material from the local construction sites in the neighborhood. See if anybody identifies with this particular emotion. If you're not standing over something, it belongs to me. I don't know if anybody identifies with that or not, but I do. And what happened was I ended up taking like plywood, 2x4s, power saws, nails, whatever I needed, roofing material. And when I was done, I actually had a pretty nice room. It was about 20 feet in the air. It was about 8 feet wide. It was about 15 feet long. I made it so you could stand up in it. I tar papered the roof so it wouldn't leak in the rain. I had an extension cord up there, and I had my own little place in the sky. Stop and think about what I just described to you for just a moment. A room 8 feet wide and 15 feet long. What did I just describe to you? A cell. I love that line in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous where it says we live in a self-imposed crisis, you know? And basically what it was is like, here I am, I'm kicking back up my treehouse, and a couple weeks after I finished it, 14 going on 15, a pretty typical year for people like us when we start going out there and doing the stuff that we do. And a guy came by from just down the street, and he was cool. And this guy's name was Mark, and Mark had hair down the middle of his back. Mark drank and did drugs and partied and had money and girlfriends, and he said, hey, David, do you want to party? And what I heard was, do you want to hang out with the coolest guy you know? That's what I heard. And I was not cool. I was anything but cool. You know, I heard somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous refer to himself, and this was Bobby Suazo, and he was one of the what I call the ghosts of AA. When I first got sober, he was the guy that they saved for last to share at a participation meeting. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. If you have a guy like that around here. And I always called it batting cleanup, you know? And what happened was is people be sharing stuff, and I'm not identifying, and all of a sudden, they get Bobby up there, and Bobby had this way of being able to say things, and he would comment on something that this person said, and that person said, and that person said, and that person said. And the way he would say it, I would hear it from him and be like, oh my God, he's like eating my lunch. He's like reading my mail. I don't know how he does that. And one of the lines he used to say on a regular basis was, you know what? When I was new, I felt like a turd with eyeballs. Now that got my attention because that's exactly the way I felt when I was new. And I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like I didn't belong, all that kind of stuff. And all I ever wanted to be was cool. You know, and I don't know if you can identify with that or not, but that's just the way I wanted to be. I wanted to be cool. And here comes Mark out in the middle of the street calling out my name, David, David. And I look out there and I go, what? And he goes, you want to party? He could have said, do you want to go out and kill somebody with me? I probably would have gone. You know, it doesn't matter. Because he's just saying, do you want to hang out with the coolest guy? You know, I said, yeah. And he says, do you want to party? And I said, absolutely. And he came up there that day, and I caught a buzz. And it wasn't just a little bitty buzz. It was a great big buzz that ran from the top of my head down to the ends of my toes. And I started to laugh. And I laughed, and I laughed. I laughed so hard, I threw up. I laughed so hard. I remember laughing that hard. And it did something for me, man. It really did something for me. And I found this out later on, that they say that 1 in 10 are alcoholics. That means 90% of the people don't get this kind of reaction that I got. I'll give you another. I kind of like statistics. I don't know if you like statistics or not, but I kind of like statistics. And I kind of came up with these on my own, but I really like this. If you actually look at the number of people in the world today that there is roughly 8 billion people in the world. Roughly 8 billion people in the world. And they say 1 in 10 people are alcoholics. That means 800 million people in the world are alcoholics. And if you call AA, General Service, or World Services today and ask them how many sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous are there today, they're going to tell you about 2.5 million people. 2.5 million people out of 800 million, almost a billion people. That is less than 1/3 of 1% of the people who are alcoholics are sitting in rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous tonight. And if you're sitting here and you got 1 day of sobriety or more, you already won the lottery, if you think about that, you know? And that's it. It's like it does something for me, and I love the effect. I absolutely love the effects of alcohol and drugs. And that's the line I was actually saying, that I don't say that in a past tense phrase. I still love the effects of alcohol and drugs. And if I could drink and get loaded and get away with it, I'd be drunk and loaded right now. But I can't, because when I drink and I get loaded, I pay a really big price. You know, when that guy came by and I caught that buzz, it was like magic, man. It was like all of a sudden, not only did it make me cool as you, it made me just a little bit better. And if anything works that good, wouldn't you do it every living, loving chance you got? Oh my God. I read this story years ago, and in the story, there was a story about a monk named Dom Perignon. He basically invented champagne. And what happened was that Dom was up there on the second floor of the monastery, and he was cooking it and drinking it and cooking it and drinking it and cooking it and drinking it. Sound familiar to anybody besides me? I would do that kind of stuff, you know? And what happened was he ended up drinking too much. He got really drunk. He ends up falling down the stairs of the monastery. Whack! And he's laying at the bottom of the stairs. And they look up, and all the monks come running up, and they surround Dom, and they look down at him, and they say, Dom, what happened? And he said, I have been drinking stars. And I'm telling you, when I read that ran chills down my spine, because that's exactly what it's like when I drink and I get loaded. You know, it like makes me one with the universe. Man, I absolutely love the effect. And I'm one of those people that believes that the alcoholism goes into 3 basic stages. The first stage is fun with no problems. The second stage is fun with problems. And the third and final stage of the game is problems with no fun. And that's the way it went for me. I don't know if that's the way it's going for you. If you look at the way Bill puts it in his story, Bill puts it this way. He says, first he was drinking for fun and conviviality. And then all of a sudden he was drinking out of need and necessity. And in the final stages of the game, he said he was drinking for oblivion. And to me, that's just kind of the same side of the coin. You know, it's just a different way of looking at it. So Bill has a way of doing that. I love the 3s in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's just one of them that I've always kind of locked in on. But basically, that's what it was. In the very beginning, it didn't matter what it was. If you told me it would get me drunk, if you told me it would get me loaded, if you told me it would catch me a buzz, I would take it, drink it, huff it, puff it, shoot it. I didn't particularly care. I'm like a garbage disposal, you know? And I'm sitting up in my treehouse, and I'm 14, 15, 16 years old. And when you're that age, you need a place to party. Do you remember like looking for a place to party out that time? You know, so you just came by my house. Not only I had one rule, you got to share with me. I love that rule. I got drunk and loaded a lot for free, and I would just kick back up there, and it didn't matter what it was, man. I would just do it. And I know I'm not the only other person like that. Is there anybody in here besides me that smoked banana peels? There's usually at least a couple of people. They're usually in the back row. You know, there's a song. I don't know if you know the song. It's called "Mellow Yellow," and it's by Donovan. And it used to piss me off because it doesn't work. If there's a song, it should work. That's just my opinion on that one, you know. I'm also the kind of guy that when I go into your house and if I ask to use your bathroom, I'm on a mission. Are there any mission people here besides me tonight? You know what I'm talking about if you're a mission person. You go in there, you shut the bathroom door, and you flip open the medicine cabinet. I'm not looking for anything specific. What I'm looking for are the red and the orange warning labels on the sides of the bottle. That's all I'm looking for. I don't even care what it is. And I look at it, and I look at it sideways, you know, a little bit, and it says, do not operate heavy machinery. That's a pretty good bet. You know, I'll probably take some of those. those, The other one is do not mix with alcohol. That's probably going to do something to you. My all-time favorite is may cause drowsiness. Hell, I'm counting on it, That's the way I am, And I get in a lot of trouble behind that kind of stuff, But I do. I love it, and I never plan on giving it up. Now, I basically dropped out of school and started partying, getting loaded in my treehouse, and started partying up there all the time. And I was never going to give this up because I love what it did for me. And I love the fact that all of a sudden now I was cool. And I was partying up there, I'm also one of those people that well-intentioned, good-meaning people start to worry about my behavior. You mentioned it. They introduced me as Treehouse David. I told you I built a treehouse in my parents' front yard. Well, just to let you know, I lived in that treehouse for just a brief period of time. That brief period of time was 10 years. That just gives you an idea that I don't play well with others, And that's what I did. And I'm kicking back up there, and I'm drinking and getting loaded all the time. And well-intentioned, good-meaning people are starting to worry about my behavior because I dropped out of school, and I'm partying, I'm drinking, I'm getting loaded all the time. And they're going, David, David, don't do that kind of stuff. And it's just like, screw you, come and get me. And they actually did, and I'll get to that in a minute, But what happened was like I'm partying and all this kind of stuff, and I'm just having a good time. But well-intentioned, good-meaning people are starting to worry about me. And I used to get this question, I used to hate with a passion. I don't know if you've ever had this question when people start going, what are you going to do with your life? When you're 15, 16, 17 years old, and you're partying all the time, and you don't have, I always felt cornered by that question. So basically what happened is that I read the life story of Jim Morrison. If you don't know who Jim Morrison was, he was the lead singer of a group called The Doors, and Jim Morrison basically drank and used himself to death. He abused himself to death with alcohol and drugs, and they found him dead in a bathtub in France at the age of 27 years old. And he literally, it's like I remember reading that, and the book is called No One Here Gets Out Alive, which is actually a line from one of his songs, which is a wonderful philosophy of life if you're trying to get people off your back, And what happened was, as I read this, I'm going, oh yeah, man, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be a rock star because I can't play a musical instrument, I can't sing, and I don't want to come down out of my tree. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drink and use myself to death. And I decided when I was 16 years old that I was going to die when I was 25 years old. Live fast, die young, leave a good-looking corpse. The James Dean theory of life, And I used to sit there and I used to say, I'm going to live my life like a rock and roll lyric. It's better burn out than fade away. That's what I would say. And the truth is like now all of a sudden, I got a pat answer. I got an answer to that question that I feel cornered by so much. What are you going to do with your life, I'm going to burn my life to the ground. I'm going to die when I was 25 years old. That's my goal, And all those people died at the age of 27. You got Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, the guy at the Crossroads. If you know any of the stories from Robert Johnson, I think his name was, who sold his soul to the devil to learn to play the blues. He died at 27. I'm going to be like that. Those kind of things. And that's just a self-deception of the practicing alcoholic, And on we go. Now I'm getting into the second stage, which is fun with problems. And by any chance, is there anybody in here besides me that has gotten a drunk driving? Anybody in here besides me got a drunk driving? I'm not taking a survey. I'm just letting you know. It's like, and I always like to say that just because you come into Alcoholics Anonymous and you might be new, you don't have to have a drunk driving. But if you're polishing up your A resume, it helps a little bit. It does. I got mine on a moped. If you don't know what a moped is, basically it's a motorized bicycle. I love telling this story in a room full of bikers. They just think it's the funniest thing in the world. And I was at a particular party one night up by my local high school, right behind it, and they were having a party. And see if anybody identifies with this particular emotion. I'm afraid I'm not going to get my fair share. Are there any my fair share people here tonight? I always think for some reason at a party, you're drinking my share of whatever it is I need to get there. I don't specifically know where there is, but you're taking my share to get there. And I don't know how to sit there and do that. So what happened was I was at this particular party at the local park, and there's a big ice chest full of beer. And I had a big P Army coat on. And every time I went by the ice chest, I would grab a beer and I'd start drinking. And I thought nobody's looking. I'd grab an extra beer and I'd stick it in one of the coat pockets because they got lots of pockets. And it's like one for me and one for my jacket, one for me and one for my jacket, one for me and one for my jacket, till it gets to the point where I can't even get any more beer in this coat. And I turn to walk away, and you can hear the bottles clanking and stuff like that. And I think I'm being slick. I think I'm being cool. I think I'm getting away with somebody. But hindsight is 20/20. And in my mind's eye, I can see them saying, at least he's leaving. Now, I got on this moped. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was out there, I used to get perfectly good used vehicles. And they were perfectly good registered vehicles when I got them. And within 6 months to a year, they'd be dying of alcoholism. I don't know if you've ever had a vehicle dying of alcoholism. When my moped was dying of alcoholism by this time, it had no headlight. For a spark plug wire, it had a coat hanger going from the distributor to the spark plug, which is fine as long as you don't catch your leg up against that. Anybody who's ever been kicked by a spark plug knows what I'm talking about, you know? And I went driving down the middle of Foothill Boulevard with this coat full of beer. And they come up behind me, and it's like, woo! And the first thought in my head is, gee, I wonder why they're pulling me over. I love the self-deception of practicing alcoholic. And I ended up getting a drunk driving that night, you know. Katie always likes a story. I went to court, and they said, you know what, you need they said, give us your driver's license. And I said, I don't have one. And they said, well, you need to get a driver's license. And if you don't, we're going to put you in jail for 2 months. They lit a fire under me. I always like to say that we don't do things because we see the light, but because we feel the heat. And that's basically what happened. They were going to throw me in jail. So I actually went out, and I was like 18, 19 years old by this time. And they actually, I went ahead, I did the driving test, you know, I did the parallel parking, you know, and I passed my driver's test. And I was really proud of that thing. Even though they made me do it, it was something it was tangible. I could hold, I could stick it in my wallet, I could show it to you. And I showed back up for court, and they said, Mr. Delbus, did you get your driver's license? I said, yes, I did, Your Honor. And you know what they did with my driver's license? They revoked it. You know why that? It's always outnumbered, it's always outmanned. You know, they push, the minute you get back up, they just push you back down, you know? I also got in a period of time where I was just drinking, what was it, vodka of the gods, Rainier Ale and vodka of the gods. It was a Trader Joe's brand vodka, $4.99 for a half a gallon, but it got the job done. I ran that moped in the middle of the cement divider on the 210 freeway one night. Just the kind of stuff that we do. I'm obnoxious. I'm rude. I get in fights with people twice my size. You know, like I said, I'm not a big guy, but that's just what happens with me. You know, and it's just like we're just the things that we do, and I'm getting in a lot of trouble. You know, now it's fun with problems. You know, and I finally decided I'm getting in too much trouble behind that. I like that part in the big book where it basically says we're appalled at some of our behavior that someone might have observed us, which creates for more drinking. And I decided I needed to quit drinking, but for me, the monster must be fed. Remember I talked about the fairy tale? And the thing is that, I don't know about you, but I like to, one of the things is I like to personify things. You know, when we look at the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, they're very generic in their nature, and they do that on purpose. They do that so that I can personify them. And one of the ones that I always looked at was they say that the disease of alcoholism, the doctor opinion says, is it says we have an allergy of the body, an obsession of the mind. The allergy of the body condemns me to drink against my will. The obsession of the mind tells me I don't have the allergy of the body, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion, the cycle of spree and remorse that they talk about, you know? And the thing is like, you know what, it's like, intellectually, that makes perfectly good sense. If you understand English, you're like, yeah, that makes perfectly good sense, but I got to personify these things. I really do. If they're not personified by me personally, somehow I can connect it inside. It's just information in my head. So I was watching this movie a few years back, and if you've never seen this movie, I highly recommend it. It's called The Little Shop of Horrors. Rick Moranis is in it. Steve Martin is a demented dentist. And yes, I know, I look like Steve Martin. You know, I've been told that. Or my other one I get is Flea from the Chili Peppers. You know, I get that once in a while. And anyway, so it's like, but what it was is like in this story, there is a plant from outer space that lives on human blood. And Rick Moranis, at the time, the plant is getting weaker and smaller, and it's kind of dying. And Rick Moranis actually cuts his finger, and the plant gets the blood. And when it does, it starts to grow and get stronger and bigger. It goes, feed me, Seymour. And to me, that's the disease of alcoholism, except it goes, feed me, David. And the monster must be fed. And the monster is insatiable. The monster cannot be stopped. And what happened was I decided I need to quit drinking, but for me, the monster must be fed. And what I did is I switched to methamphetamines, and I love methamphetamines, you know. Is there any other tweakers in here besides me tonight? There's always in the back row, you know. You got to stay close to the door. You got to keep your wall back, the wall. Anyway, but I used to tell my friends, dude, I quit drinking. I haven't had a drink in 6 months. I've only been asleep twice, but hey, you know, sobriety through methamphetamines, man. And I got down to 110 pounds. I thought I looked good at 110 pounds, you know. You could see my skull in my face. You could see my eye sockets, you know. My friends would look at me and go, David, you're getting too thin. And you know what I think to myself? They're just jealous. That's what I would think, you know. And it was just terrible, you know. But you know what? I got busy, because when you're doing that kind of stuff, you get busy. You don't go anywhere, but you get busy. But I'm in a tree, so what do? I just go up, and I built a room on top of that one and another room on top of that one. I ran cable TV up there back before it was even fashionable. Someone came came by one time and had one of those boxes with the 40 channels. Hey, David, can I trade you for something with this? Sure. And I used to put a Treehouse up in there. I put a cable TV, and I put a TV in up there. I had phone up there. I'm up there and I'm having a good time. But I got really bizarre in that stuff, because if you don't eat and you don't sleep and you're living in a tree, strange and bizarre things start to happen. I'll tell you that right now. And I got really paranoid, not just a little bit paranoid. And on Christmas Day of 1986, I completely lost my mind. Just, and all of a sudden they were out to get me. And I mean, it was bad. And this is where it came down to. It's like, I thought Care Bears were coming down from outer space to overthrow the world. There was a big thing going on at Pizza Hut at the time, and they were doing Care Bear promotions. And you're very influenced by what's ever being seen in the general public, on those billboards and all that kind of stuff. When you're really paranoid, it doesn't matter what it is. I thought my parents were cyborgs and all this kind of stuff because the Terminator was out the year before or the year before that, whatever it was. So that was all going on. So I thought my parents were cyborgs. And my all-time, someone else says, you got to talk about the squirrels. Someone said, hey, David, we heard about you. We want to hear about the squirrels. And it was the federal squirrels. Now, I'm living in a tree, so I have squirrels in my tree. And if you've ever seen squirrels behave at a park and stuff like that, they're fun and they run around and they frolic. But if you're paranoid, it's not friendly, and it's kind of mean, and they're out to get you, and they're part of the conspiracy, and they would run across the roof of my tree house, and they'd be fighting and all that kind of stuff, and I perceived this was not natural behavior of squirrels. Like, I know different, and I thought to myself, since that's not the natural behavior, those are federal squirrels trained by the government. They'd say, go get David on Tuesdays at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The insanity of it all is just absolutely bat nuts crazy, And I finally convinced myself that I was having a bad reaction to the drugs, and I started going, no one's coming to get me, no one's coming to get me, no one's coming to get me, no one's coming to get me. And I convinced myself that nobody was coming to get me. And you know what happened, don't you? They came and got me is what happened, And they raided my treehouse. But it wasn't the fire truck, it wasn't the Care Bears from outer space, it wasn't the federal squirrels, it wasn't my cyborg parents, it wasn't any of those things. It was the Glendale Narcotics Division in the neighborhood, because forgot to mention, for the last 8 or 10 years, I've been selling dope and stuff out of my treehouse, because that's the way I kept partying, I'm not a bad guy. I'm not because of these things I do. It's because I never got offered enough. So the only way I could keep it going was to do this kind of stuff. And so they raided my treehouse, but they didn't know how to raid a treehouse. They had to bring down fire trucks, cops in riot gear, 20 cops out there, pointing the guns up there. And they a hook and ladder, and they kicked in the door of my treehouse, and they took me into custody. They said they didn't like drug dealing tree dwellers in La Crescenta. That's the way they put it. And now, this is my bottom. I don't know what your bottom was out there, but this is my bottom out there. And my bottom was this. When they raided my treehouse, my father came out to see what was going on, and he yelled up to me and said, David, they're coming up. And they arrested my father for obstruction of justice. And they stuck me in a holding tank with my father. And it's my opinion they wanted to see if he was going to kill me. That's just my opinion on that one. I remember sitting in this holding tank and looking at my feet. I remember looking up and finally looking over at my father and saying those 2 words that alcoholics of my type say in those situations. You know what those 2 words are, don't you? I'm sorry. And we're the sorriest people in the world, And whenever you go to court, you get the opportunity to cop a plea. It's either guilty, not guilty, or no contest. And no contest is the one I always use. And it means I'm guilty with an explanation. But aren't we always guilty with an explanation, And basically what it was is that my dad bailed himself out, and he left me in. And one of the big lies that I told myself, and see if you can finish this along with me, I'm not hurting anybody but myself. How many of us have said that when we were out there? Now I can no longer believe the big lie. I love denial. You know what I love about denial? Because it doesn't matter if I'm agreeing with you. It's not really true, not deep down inside. I can no longer believe the big lie, and now I'm in the end stages of the game where it's problems with no fun. And it's not enough. If you're an alcoholic of my type, they talk about ill health, the warning of a doctor, falling in love, outside circumstances, all sorts of different things. If these things become operative for people who are just problem drinkers, they can stop or moderate on willpower. But not so with the real alcoholic like me, people like us, If you can just not drink or use no matter what, which I might have said earlier, kills people like you and I, more power to you. But I need to be doing these kind of things. If I don't continue to do this kind of stuff on a regular basis, I don't get to stay sober. And it wasn't enough, I remember sitting there looking at that. And my last year out there was 1988. And I saw a lot of new people here with less than a year of sobriety. And I know what the last 365 days brought you to where you are now, to where however many days or weeks or months of sobriety you have right now. But that last 365 days, I can bet money dimes to donuts that it was a salty year for you guys. And it was a salty year for me in 1988. And I ended up going through a place called American Hospital because they were trying to give me 3 years in prison, but they gave me the opportunity to go through recovery or go in prison. I mean, they sat there and they put it this way, a spiritual way of life or a hideous and horrible alcoholic death. And the alcoholic is the only person to look at you and go, how bad of an alcoholic death are we talking about? That's the kind of stuff that we do. They're getting prison or recovery house. We kind of weigh it out. So I ended up going to a place, and I'm playing the game because I want to do the very least I can and still get into heaven. I want to get one newcomer, one cup of coffee. I want 5 years of sobriety or the equivalent credit thereof. I don't want to put the effort into this kind of stuff, And I ended up going through a place called American Hospital, 28-day spin dry. Got out of there, got loaded again, went back to court. They said no. Then I ended up going through a place called Impact House in Pasadena. I was there for 89 days. I got 89 days of sobriety. But they threw me out of there. I got written up almost every other day I was there. I got in a lot of trouble. I never made it past the first phase, and they kicked me out of there, And I got loaded again because people like me have to go on one last run. And that's what it was like out there. And that last run lasted about 3 months. And when I finally came through the doors on December 19th of 1988, I don't know what made that day any other different than any other day other than the fact that I was done. And I was done. And this is just one of my personal opinions. I don't believe we pick our sobriety dates. I believe our sobriety dates pick us. If we could all pick our own sobriety dates, we'd pick New Year's, our birthday, or 10-4. I like 10-4. I don't know. Somebody said that, and I thought that was funny. We pick a fun date, But December 19th, I was like 6 days before Christmas. And someone goes, how do you get sober 6 days before Christmas? And this is the truth. I didn't pick that sobriety date. It picked me. And when I finally came through the doors, I was just done. I was hopeless. I wasn't just, they used to say when I was new, we wish you desperation. I was way more than desperate when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was absolutely hopeless. And I love that part in Bill's story when he says he saw Ebby, he goes, could I hear what he said? Of course I could hear what he was saying, for I was hopeless, And I was hopeless when I came to the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a 9th grade education. I was dying of this disease. I was looking at 3 years in prison. I was batting nuts crazy. I weighed 110 pounds. I was sucked up. I was looking just on and on and on and on and on. The fact that that I was powerless over alcohol, that my life was unmanageable, was without question. But just looking at my life, it was just a disaster. But the thing is I didn't even realize it. I used to think if you would just get off my back, I'll be okay. We were talking about this right before that, during the break, about incomprehensible demoralization. And I heard this at a meeting out in Hawaii. The thing is when you're in incomprehensible demoralization, you don't know what's going on. Why? Because it's incomprehensible. You kind of think to yourself, it's not that bad. You tell yourself it's not that bad. I actually remember getting about 2.5 years sober, and I look back over my life and I went, oh my God, I can't believe I lived, let alone that I'd gotten better. One of the things that happened was that when I was actually out there, I got some felonies and all this kind of stuff. When I had gotten sober, I was a couple of years sober, almost 3 years sober, I got a notice in the mail to serve on a jury of my peers. And I thought, I want to do that. I know people say, you can get out of that. I was like, no, I wanted to do it. I had stood in that courtroom. I had been called a derelict to society, a danger to myself and others. I had stood in a courtroom, and I had showed up late one day, and the judge had said, take him into custody forthwith, and dragged me into custody right on the bat. I had been called so many different things, and all of a sudden, now I get an opportunity to serve on a jury of my peers. And all of a sudden, I looked at it, I go, I got arrested quite a few times out there. There might have been a felony in there somewhere along the line. Found out that raid was a felony. And I went out, and I got that felony expunged. I petitioned the judge. I've been sober for about 3 years by this particular time. And I did the stuff that they suggested to me, And I ended up getting it, not because of any particular reason or because I wanted a better career and that kind of stuff. I just wanted to serve on a jury, That's what it was. And I actually had the opportunity to do that. And I stood in a courtroom. And I'll tell you this, man. At this one particular time, they actually sat there and they did the thing. And then one of the questions they ask you when they do I forget the term when they're picking people on a jury. But what is it called? Voir dire. When they do that particular part, they ask you, and one of the things is they'll stand you up after they've asked you a bunch of questions, and the judge will say, do you find this juror acceptable? And they'll say yes or no. And then they say to the defense attorney, do you find this jury acceptable? And they'll say yes or no. And they accepted me after I had admitted to them that I was a felon, but I had gotten expunged, And they swore me in. And I always like to say, it's really neat that I can come in here and tell you at one point that, I consider myself to be a productive member of society. I love it when I can tell you that the state of California does too. You know, that's just kind of one of the things that happened. I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous and knew this was never going to work. I knew I was wasting my time and my life was never going to get any better. But I did the stuff that you told me to do. And Katie talked about those from her guy, her old-timer Sailor Jim. You know, and that's the thing is like we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. We start praying to God. We do the inventory. The steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, all 12 of them, I'm always used to, like, here they are, 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. None of them are optional if we want recovery in AA. You know, I hear people say that sponsorship is not my forte. What do you mean it's not your forte? It's the 12th step of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's what we do as a result of these steps. We try to carry the message and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. You know, and the thing is like, I'll just tell you, I'm running out of time here, but this is the thing, this was my day today. I got up this morning, I got up a little early, I got up about 5 o'clock, you know? And it was a little bit earlier than I planned on doing. But today, Saturday is my morning I give to my guys in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know? And so what it was is one guy showed up at 7. He's one of my newer guys. He's actually sober a little bit longer than me, but he asked me to take him through the steps. We've been together twice. We still haven't done any work, but we're getting to know each other. That was fine. And then my other guy showed up. So he showed up from 7 to 8. Then another guy showed up from 8 to 9. And we talked for a little bit about things that were going on. And another guy showed up, and we talked from 9 to 10. And I think we're in the middle of the amends process, and that's what we're looking at. And then from 10 to 11, I had another guy. And for a long time, I used to say, you know what, all I'm going to do is work with people on Saturdays, you know, and that was my morning today. No, just recently, all of a sudden, another guy started sponsoring, says, well, I can't make it on Saturdays, I have to work. I said, you know what, I'm going to bend my rules a little bit. So now I'm working with the guy on Tuesday nights now at the same time. So now it's like that. Now I got a guy in a recovery house. Well, he can't get to my house, and he can't show up at my house on Tuesdays. So now I've got it Saturdays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, you know, and it's like, and it just goes on and on and on. And the thing is that I find that when I'm able to say yes to these things in Alcoholics Anonymous, I seem to always find the time. And as a result of that, I'm able to get and stay sober. You know, I've been sober now a little over 35 years. I'm coming up on 13,000 days of sobriety in the next 30 or 60 days or something like that, you know, and I can't even believe what happens around here. I plan on dying when I was 25 years old when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. Today, I want to live to be the oldest living member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to be at the International Convention one year going, thank you for this 100-year cake. You know, I want triple-digit sobriety. Not bad for a guy who planned on dying when he was 25 years old, you know. I'm looking at retirement now. I'm 60 years old, you know. And I got a wife, and we met in Alcoholics Anonymous. I always say she heard me speak at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. She wanted what I had, so I obliged, you know, and that kind of stuff that happens in AA, you know. I actually have a podium in the bedroom in case she doesn't hear me enough. You know, that's a joke, you know. But anyway, the thing is that we have kids in Alcoholics Anonymous. And to be honest, you know, and I'll wrap it up here in just a minute here. We have amazing stuff going on in our life right now that I can't tell you about because we had to sign an NDA. But I'll give you this right now. We have an autistic son, and somewhere along the line, we actually applied. We just applied for, there was an open casting call. My son is going to be in a major motion picture, and my wife and my son are leaving for England in 3 weeks. And I can't even believe this kind of stuff that happens to people like us, good stuff, bad stuff. My other son got hit by a car back in December, you know, and that he's okay, but this is the kind of stuff that happens. Alcoholics Anonymous gives us the tools, good or bad, to deal with what happens as long as I am willing to suspend my life on Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything good in my life should be stamped property of AA. You know, I heard somebody say that, you know, and there's one other speaker that used to talk about this, or he still says it, but I always like this. It says, like, if you're new, come all the way in and sit all the way down. If you've heard him say that, you know what I'm talking about. And don't let the life AA gives you get in the way of your AA life. So when somebody calls me up and says, hey, David, can you come out to is it Hermosa Beach where you at right now? Manhattan Beach, you know, wherever you're at. The answer is, of course I will, because my life depends upon me being able to carry the message. If it be one-on-one or in a group of people or whatever I do, this is what we do. We have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. I can't wait to see what happens next. I love Alcoholics Anonymous so much. I'll tell you this right now. I don't know if you've ever seen the old circus jacket of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's red and yellow with the big dot in the middle of it. I have that tattooed on my back. As far as I know, I'm the only patched member of Alcoholics Anonymous that I know of. Other people get the circle and the triangle. Man, I got the whole big book, you know? And that's just kind of stuff that we do. That's my commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know? I wish I had time. I wish I had time to take you down the path, to take you through the inventory process, the things I do with my sponsor, and I still have a sponsor today. I still pray to God. I still do these things on a regular basis. But that is not for me to do with you tonight. You know, that's for you to do with your sponsor and be able to bring that kind of stuff back to this meeting when you come next week, the week after that, and on, to be of service and do that kind of stuff. And with it, you know, I'm just going to tell you this, that there's a little poem that I have, and it's called The Touch of the Master's Hand. If you've never heard this, this is exactly how it goes. It reminds me of exactly what Alcoholics Anonymous is all about, and it goes like this. It was battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it was scarcely worth his while to waste his time with the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. What am I bid, good people, he cries, who starts the bidding for me? $1, do I hear two? $2, who makes it three? $3 once, $3 twice, going for three, but no. From the room far back, a gray-bearded man came forward and picked up the bow. Then wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening up the strings, he played a melody, pure and sweet as the angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, so now my bid for this old violin, as he held it aloft with its bow. 1,000, do I hear two? 2,000, who makes it three? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, going and gone, said he. The audience cheered, but some of them cried. We don't understand. What change it's worth? Swift came the reply, the touch of the master's hand. And many a man whose life out of tune, all battered with bourbon and sin, his auction cheap to a thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game he travels on. He is going once, he is going twice, he is going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul, the change that is wrought by the touch of the master's hand. And I am that battered and scarred violin. Hopefully the master has played me well. Thank you guys for having me out.